Aloha boys and girls, today I'm bringing the fascinating story of a multifaceted Spaniard who became an influential figure in the political and economic history of the early Kingdom of Hawaii. A humble deserter from Andalusia that became one of the most important men when Hawaii was opening up to the world. Today I will talk about the forgotten story and legacy of Francisco de Paula Marín. To understand the life of Don Francisco de Paula Marín, we need to place ourselves in the context of the late 18th century. During this time, major European countries like Great Britain and Spain were very actively competing to expand their influence over the North Pacific. In response to the growing English threat and Russian fur traders, Spain founded missions in California and explored the American West Coast as far north as Alaska. In fact, they even established a fortified colony on Nootka Island, now part of Canada, which they had to give up in 1795 after settling the dispute with Britain by diplomatic means. In this same scenario of the North Pacific, the British sailor George Anson captured a Spanish ship with very valuable merchandise and, more importantly, information that the Spanish crown had kept in secret. This included a navigation chart that already showed the Hawaiian Islands, years before James Cook's alleged discovery. Thanks to this chart, Cook found the islands without difficulty. Hawaii, or Hawaii as it's pronounced in the native language, was populated by Polynesians and divided into 4 warring kingdoms. One is Hawaii, the largest and southernmost island, along with part of the neighboring Maui. Another kingdom with the rest of Maui and Molokai. A third one on the island of Oahu, where the current capital of Honolulu is located, and a fourth kingdom in the westernmost islands of Kauai and Niihau. At this turbulent time, Kamehameha came to prominence. Not Goku's famous move from Dragon Ball, but this man with a beautiful bronze statue dedicated to him in front of the Supreme Court of Hawaii. From 1782 to 1795, Kamehameha led a series of conflicts to unite these kingdoms under one rule, thus establishing the Kingdom of Hawaii. It was during these transformative years that Francisco de Paula Marín arrived and found opportunities to enrich himself and become a relevant political actor. Assisted by Western firearms provided by 2 British allies, Kamehameha gained a decisive upper hand in his military campaigns. Recognizing the benefits the Westerners had brought to him, Kamehameha welcomed Europeans to help him modernize Hawaii's military capabilities and develop international trade. This made Hawaii a critical stopover for ships traveling between the Americas and Asia. However, Kamehameha I was cautious not to let foreign powers and individuals undermine the traditional Hawaiian society, maintaining the island caste system and polytheistic beliefs. Thus, very few native Hawaiians converted to Christianity before his death in 1819. His successor didn't really rule, and it was the Queen Dowager who effectively governed, and with her, changes began to accelerate. She lifted many old restrictions, particularly those that affected women, and Hawaii moved away from the traditional Hawaiian religious practices towards the Calvinist Christianity introduced by American missionaries. Wishing to strengthen ties with the great power of the time, the United Kingdom, the king and several Hawaiian chiefs traveled to England, which led to a tragedy, as the king and many chiefs caught measles in London and, well, it didn't end well. Back in Hawaii, foreign diseases wreaked havoc, drastically decimating the native population, as it had happened in other parts of Oceania and the Americas. After Marin's death, the first Hawaiian constitution in 1840 recognized private land ownership, a significant shift from the earlier system where all the lands belonged to the king, who could grant or revoke their exploitation at will. This change paved the way for increasing American influence. It culminated in a coup led by some Americans at the end of the 19th century, and they proclaimed the Republic of Hawaii before the islands were formally annexed by the United States in 1900. It was in the Kingdom of Hawaii, amidst great changes and openness to foreign influences, where Francisco de Paula Marín lived. He was the only Spaniard to settle permanently in the islands during the first decades of existence of the kingdom. Born on November 25, 1774, in Jerez de la Frontera in southern Spain, Marín eventually made his way to Honolulu, where he passed away on October 30th, 1837. Known to the locals and the English-speaking community alike as Manini or Marini, little is known about his early life because he was reserved about his younger years. It is documented, however, that he started his career as a cabin boy and spent time in New Spain, now Mexico, and at the Spanish Nootka Fort in Canada before deserting. Marin's arrival in Hawaii is surrounded by mystery, with different versions of the story. One story from some of his friends suggests that he was sent to San Francisco, but there some English sailors made him get drunk, and when Marín woke up he was already in a ship en route to Hawaii. A twist straight out of the movie The Hangover.
Holy fuck, he's not kidding, there's a tiger in there.
No, there isn't.
Another tale tells of his desertion in Nootka, where he then joined an American merchant ship heading to China, stopping in Hawaii along the way. Yet another version claims he fled to Hawaii after murdering a superior while he was on duty in Mexico. It is believable that some English sailors got him drunk because forced enlistments for transoceanic routes were common at that time to get cabin boys to work in merchant ships. So this is how this young man probably arrived in Hawaii in 1794, when King Kamehameha I was finishing his wars of unification. Over the next 25 years, he served as an indispensable aide to the king, taking on roles such as interpreter, business manager, personal physician, and even customs collector at the port of Honolulu. Under Kamehameha's son, he was appointed captain of the Hawaiian Navy. He was basically the first contact foreigners had when they arrived in Hawaii thanks to his language skills and responsibilities at the port. And that gave Marín a privileged advantage over other people in his ventures, including his very lucrative lodging business. I will talk more about his businesses later when I explain his legacy. A French traveler named Jacques Arago was in Hawaii shortly after the death of Kamehameha I, and he describes Marín as follows, quote, "Marín does not have the Castilian pride. One can guess he had difficult moments. His language, always correct, not without elegance. His features are strongly accented, a few not deep wrinkles under the eyebrows. His eyes show a singular expression of a mixture of suffering and pride that one will search in vain to define. Was it exile that led him to Oahu? Was it a crime that brought him to Hawaii? Was there in him a defined resolution, sadness or curiosity, desperation or dishonor? Undoubtedly, Marín has the right to our greatest consideration, to all our affection." End quote. Marín was a jack of all trades: farmer, cattle rancher, doctor, merchant, interpreter, builder, and advisor to kings. For someone who did not have the English, American, or French gunboats at his side to threaten the kings of Hawaii, it is amazing how he not only survived without the help of other Spaniards, but also was able to position himself as one of the most notable citizens of the new kingdom, despite the slander that some envious people spread. He lacked an advanced formal education, but he had an innate ability to learn trades and languages. Perhaps this is related to his stay in New Spain or his service at the fort in Nootka Island, because there the colony was self-sufficient and established the first orchard and irrigation system of the American Northwest. An excellent soldier of the Enlightenment had to have knowledge from various disciplines to adapt to each situation. Marín is described as a Spaniard who lived like a Hawaiian, since he dressed and ate like them, used knowledge of medicinal herbs, both Western and native, or he practiced polygamy, as he was married to 3 or 4 women of Hawaiian nobility. He was essentially a Hawaiian Jake Sully from Avatar.
I see you.
I see you.
He had at least 23 children, many of whom died in their infancy, as it was common in his time. And unlike many foreigners who had children with native women, Marín took care of their well-being. Sometimes he tried to return to Hawaii and buy a ranch, but he recanted. After all, he had a good life in Hawaii. He was a respectable figure, and he had formed strong ties with the royalty, the foreign residents of Hawaii, and those who sold their products from the Americas to Hawaii. Moreover, the governor of California told him that his multiple women would not be welcome, and Francisco was not willing to leave them as other foreigners did. Marín's personal life was not without drama though, and he was no saint in the way he treated his women. In his diary, he wrote that one of his wives once ran away. He found her and hid her. And on another occasion, the same woman tried to run away with the ship's captain, and he found her in bed with him as revenge, because Marín had been unfaithful to her. Apparently, having 3 or 4 wives wasn't enough for Marín. Among his children, 4 stand out, starting with George Marín, who was a merchant sailor who visited many islands in the Pacific. George visited the Willis Islands of South Georgia, these random islands located in the middle of nowhere in the South Atlantic. And there he killed the king of the Willis Islands and proclaimed himself king, only to be murdered by the natives along with his employees. Bro thought he was him, only to find out he was not. It is said that after Francisco found out about George's death, he was no longer the man everyone had known. His last surviving son was Paul Marín, who served in the Hawaiian cavalry, and was a rancher, lawyer, and politician close to King Kamehameha III. One of his daughters, named Antoinette, lived for a long time in California before returning to Honolulu, and becoming an influential person in the last years of the Hawaiian monarchy. Another daughter caught the eye of King Kamehameha I's heir, though their marriage never occurred. Much of what we know about the early kingdom of Hawaii is owed to Marín's diary, though sadly only a much shortened English translation of his diary survives. Little is known about his early years in Hawaii. However, reports suggest that from 1800 to 1809, he frequently left the islands to trade and smuggle across Polynesia, in Macau, in China, and along the west coast of Spanish America. In 1813, Kamehameha I returned to his native island, Hawaii, and the king ordered on several occasions that Marín accompany him, even under death threats. He had to obey because there was already a precedent of a foreigner who fell from grace and was poisoned. And on the island of Hawaii, he supervised the construction of a stone house for the king until he could return to Oahu in 1814. In 1816, he was already on the verge of falling from grace because the number of ships stopping in Honolulu had increased, and with them the incidents between the unruly sailors and the Hawaiians. And Marín had the unpleasant task of mediating in these conflicts. To take a break from these problems, he briefly returned to sea trading between California and Alaska under an American ship. Since he was not close to the king from then on, he maintained a stronger relationship with the governors of Oahu. In 1820, Marín, as always, gave a warm welcome to some very special newcomers, the Puritan missionaries from the United States. Little could he imagine that these Puritans were like Karens, who would make him lose much of his political and economic influence in his later years. And envious American and British residents complained more and more against Marín. Despite practicing polygamy or having attended some pagan ceremonies under Kamehameha I, Marín always maintained that he was Catholic, and he baptized his children, promoted the baptism of natives, and he even baptized the sick on the verge of death to save their souls. The Queen Dowager opposed the progress made by the French Catholic mission, since having both Protestant and Catholic missionaries could lead to conflicts. Marín refused to convert to a Protestant form of Christianity, saying that he worshipped God as they worship it in his country, Spain. A merchant from Boston reported in 1831 that as a result of this, the Spaniard had lost many of his granted properties and livestock, since you need to remember that private ownership did not exist yet in Hawaii. Having lost the favor of a Hawaiian court increasingly dominated by Protestant missionaries and lost many of his riches, Don Francisco de Paula Marín became austere in his final years, since he had a family to take care of. This, and references to his reluctance to share seats with inexperienced farmers, has led him to be characterized as stingy, to the extent that in Hawaiian language the word manini has been perpetuated to refer to someone stingy. Protestant missionaries criticized Marín for his polygamy and for not having forced his Hawaiian wives to convert to Christianity. They saw him as an immoral Christian, and the French Catholic missionaries thought the same, despite the enormous personal cost Marín assumed by remaining firm in his Catholic convictions. Undoubtedly, Francisco de Paula Marín was a man who did not fit into the rigidly tolerable parameters in his society of origin. But this ambivalence is something normal within what we can call peripheral or frontier societies. And when a society is gradually transformed by the influence of foreign ideas, without being able to impose changes immediately. Marín, old and with declining health, thought about leaving the country forever. But where could he go? He had spent most of his life in Hawaii. His family and friends were there. So he did not really have a place to go back to. A common problem among immigrants who haven't been in their homeland for many years. He had no choice but to stay in the Kingdom of Hawaii. At his death in 1837, when he was 63, he was not even given a Catholic funeral, or even a dignified one, because the Calvinist minister was such a son of a bitch that he read a sermon that consigned Don Francisco's soul to eternal perdition. If one were superstitious, one might believe that the earthquake and great tsunami that struck Hawaii on the day of the Spaniard's burial was a protest by God or the old Hawaiian gods for the indignity suffered by Marín at his death. This regrettable situation was denounced and had an influence in the recognition of the freedom of worship in Hawaii in 1839. But for Marín, this despicable act was only amended in 1994 when his remains were buried in a ceremony that involved his descendants, Hawaiians who officiated traditional rites, and a Catholic bishop. While Francisco de Paula Marín is virtually an unknown figure in his native Spain, he left a lasting legacy in Hawaii and is still remembered by some people for his significant contributions to agriculture and commerce. Marín is credited with introducing many European plants, animals, and agricultural techniques to the islands. Although some legends might overstate his role in introducing certain species, there is no doubt about his impact as an innovative livestock breeder and farmer, and as Hawaii's first horticulturalist and the man who introduced many of the most important crops of present-day Hawaii. One of his most notable achievements was introducing the pineapple to Hawaii in 1813, a fruit that is now the most iconic of Hawaii.
Let's see if Hawaii pineapple actually tastes better. Yes, this is the best pineapple I've ever had.
Marín acted both as a businessman and as a scientist, and he introduced and cultivated a wide variety of crops through trial and error, and with advice from other European farmers. Don Francisco introduced papayas, mangoes, orange trees, fig trees, olive trees, grapevines, roses, melons, cotton, wheat, barley, tobacco, garlic, rice, tomatoes, potatoes, and many others, including edible cactuses. He was not the first to successfully cultivate sugarcane in Hawaii, but he was the most successful one. In addition to plants, he raised numerous animals such as cows, sheep, goats, pigs, ducks, chickens, horses, and various birds. Most of these animals were imported from contacts he had in Spanish California. Beyond agriculture, Marín was a pioneer in the industrial sector of Hawaii, becoming the first local producer of alcohol, creating well-regarded wines, beers, and brandies that were in high demand by both native islanders and foreign whalers and traders. His ventures didn't stop there. He also engaged in producing coconut and cocoa oils, salted pork, soaps, lemon syrup, molasses, pickles, butter, cigars, and wax candles. His extensive network across America and other parts of the Pacific made him an essential middleman for importing seeds, livestock, and medicinal herbs into the early Kingdom of Hawaii. Marín really had a diversified portfolio, and thanks to his close relationship with the Hawaiian royalty for some years, he shared businesses with them, such as the lucrative export of sandalwood and pearls, and being the supplier of the royal court and the ships that docked in the port of Honolulu. With hard work and intelligence, Francisco de Paula Marín managed to get involved in all the important businesses of the island and rise as the most influential man in the economy of the first 2 decades of the Kingdom of Hawaii. During his glory days under King Kamehameha I, he was granted many properties in the Honolulu area, including ranches, orchards, forests, fish nurseries, and islets like Ford Island. Today, Ford Island houses the Pearl Harbor Memorial Museums because it is right next to the famous naval and air base. But back then, it was known as Goat Island because there Marín had goats, pigs, and also rabbits, hence the name. And it was also a place for pearl gathering, that's why it's known as Pearl Harbor. Some of his granted properties became iconic, such as his gardens described as plant treasuries, the European-style coral stone mansion where he lived, or the guest house that accommodated all the temporary visitors of the port of Honolulu. Aside from Marina Street, in Honolulu, named in honor of this prominent figure in Hawaiian history, his most cited properties by travelers continue to be remembered with the names of some streets, such as Lima Street and Vineyard Boulevard, all located in the historic center of the capital of Hawaii. This is the great legacy of this Spaniard who, without the help of his country or other compatriots, managed to become a member of the elite of the early Kingdom of Hawaii and contributed to the economic development of the islands. That finishes off my review of the amazing biography of Francisco de Paula Marín. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and podcast New History of Spain for more content. You can also join my Discord for community updates and to meet other history lovers, and you can get early access to my content and other benefits by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/newhistoryspain. If you want more stories about Spaniards in Oceania, please let me know. For the Spanish show, I did a full series of episodes. And tell me in the comment section if Marín's story surprised you or if you already knew about him. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to see you next time.